Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon if you're joining us from the UK. Good morning if you're joining us from the East Coast of the United States, and an even earlier good morning if you're joining us from the West Coast. Wow, that would be a really early start. Good to see so many names coming into the attendee box. If you're wondering what is going on with this screen, I find one of the most awkward parts of webinars is this initial introductory piece where you're waiting for people to come on, so you're kind of buying a bit of time talking about things while people come on before you get started. I'm a big fan of 80s and 90s games, and I saw this and it just reminded me of playing an old Tekken game or something on a console, so I thought I'd include it there at the start of the presentation. So just to do a quick introduction to what we're going to be covering here today. Before we actually jump into the slides and the agenda and the items we're going to be running through, if you could just do me a really quick favor, without the risk of sounding like a broken record, just go to the chat box and please let me know. You can see my picture, you can hear what I'm saying, and you can also see my slides as well. I don't want to be wasting any more time talking if you can't hear or see me, and also see my slides. Just got to find the chat box myself now. All good. Cool. Okay. Thank you very much, Andrew, for letting me know. Okay, good to go. So today's session is going to be somewhat of a back to basics session. And what I want to talk to you about is how to create systemized and scalable process templates for your workflows. And we're going to be spending a bit of time digging into what exactly I mean by process templates, what exactly I mean by workflows as well, and also why we should even bother with this stuff in the first place. So a few housekeeping rules before we actually do get started. First of all, if you have any questions throughout this, please, if you could use the Q&A box to ask those. It just helps me to monitor them. It's quite hard to keep an eye on the chat box sometimes if there's a few messages coming in, whereas a Q&A box, I can keep an eye on any questions that get asked. I will be using polls, maybe one or two throughout the presentation, so it would be great if you could engage with those, just to get a feel really for where you are, what kind of things are resonating, and whether what we're talking about is actually making sense. And then finally, if you want a copy of the slides, or you have any questions, or you want to say anything about the session at all, please feel free to tweet us. Our Twitter handle is there, @usepixie, and it's in the bottom corner of every slide that we'll be going through. So moving forwards, the part of the presentation I'm going to keep as brief as possible because I know you are not interested. Introductions. My name is Jordan. I am one of the co-founders here at Pixie. For my sins, I've spent the last 6 years working with accountants, mostly trying to market and sell you stuff, previously working as a marketer for a coach and trainer, since freelanced with a number of different companies, including Practice Ignition. I also work with the team at the Digital Accountancy Show and the products that they do, and more recently joined the team at Pixie as a co-founder and their head of marketing. And for those of you that aren't familiar, I can see one or two customers and one or two names I also don't recognize. Pixie is a practice management and CRM app that really helps accountants to take control of their tasks, files, emails, communications, workflows, and much, much more. And hopefully throughout this presentation, I'll be able to just share a little bit about what that is. We do have many happy Pixies, and the number of Pixies is growing day by day. I won't bore you with reading these, but if you are interested in learning more, please feel free to check out our website. So down to brass tacks, what is the agenda for today? So we're going to start off with the big question: why? Why are we talking about streamlining processes and workflows? What is the point of this? What is the benefit of us investing some time in looking at this as a topic? Then we're going to be looking at the basics of SOPs, which are standard operating procedures and workflows. We're going to be looking at a C word that is actually one of the most powerful tools that you can use within your processes and workflows. We'll also be looking at how you can leverage video within your workflows to really enhance the training and knowledge part of them. And then finally, we'll finish up with a bit of internal deadline management, looking at exactly what that is and why it's important when it comes to managing your different workflows. So starting with the biggest question, I guess, why? Why are we talking about streamlining workflows, streamlining processes, What is the point? So I've got a few slides here just explaining, I guess, a few key reasons why this might be of interest. Now, the first one is a big one for many firms I've spoken to, which is struggling to delegate and let go of tasks. Now, maybe you've got a team of people that you work in your firm, and you want to be able to let go more things to them, but you struggle, maybe because you can't get your head around the idea of delegation and wanting to let go. Something I personally struggle with as well. I like to be able to keep control of all the balls that are in the air, but also it could just be the fact that there isn't really a process for them to follow. Maybe the workflows and the processes within the firm aren't documented well enough so that it's easy to delegate to people with the peace of mind knowing that they can just follow the process and the work will get done. Another thing here is that maybe work lands back on your desk, and when it does, it has mistakes or errors. And we're only human. Mistakes are quite natural things. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but maybe this is highlighting a gap in your processes and workflows. And if we look at some of the reasons why mistakes actually happen, there are three core reasons. The first is an error of ignorance, and an error of ignorance sounds a lot worse than it actually is. It's just to do with the lack of knowledge. It's just not knowing what you are meant to do. So if you've got a team member that you maybe delegated a task to, or there was something on their to-do list and they did it and there was a few mistakes and errors, it could have just been a lack of knowledge. They weren't sure what they needed to do properly. It could be an error of ineptitude. And this is more to do with they have the knowledge, they just didn't know how to apply it properly. So kind of sits within the training area as well. And then the third one is something hopefully we can all avoid, which is an error of incompetence. And this is just, maybe they're not quite the right person for the role after all. And these three things have come from this book here, and it's a book that I would really recommend anybody to read, any business owner, in fact, as well as accounting firm owners, which is called The Checklist Manifesto. And in this book, amongst many other things, Atul, the author, who is a surgeon, I believe, yes, he talks about the three reasons why mistakes happen when we're doing work, and it comes down to these three things. And he specifically talks about how checklists can help to reduce errors of ignorance, ineptitude, and incompetence, because by having a checklist in place, people have all the answers that they need. They can see all of the steps laid out very clearly. And the same thing applies for workflows and processes. If mistakes are happening, then perhaps we haven't got enough of the knowledge and application in there that people need to actually go and run with it. So moving on then, another reason, which is a lot more topical, is that maybe you've either got team members off on holiday, which is the world seems to be on holiday this past week. And as such, maybe other team members in your firm that are having to pick up tasks that they wouldn't normally do. And if they are having to do that, because we're currently working remotely or in a hybrid model where we're not in the office to shout over our team members and ask them how to do something, maybe people are unsure. They're getting stuck on tasks. They're not really sure what the process is or what they should be doing or how to follow it. And this is another reason why having documented processes and workflows is really, really key. And then the fourth and final reason really is efficiency and scalability. And if we break that down into two parts, number one, efficiency, it kind of makes sense, right? If we've got the process fully documented, everybody knows what all the steps are, A to Z, and there is enough detail in each of those steps for people to follow, then things are going to happen a bit faster and slicker than they might have done before. And the result is that you possibly can start to scale up a little bit faster. Often when businesses are scaling up, you start to see the cracks beginning to show in terms of the systems, or possibly more because there's an over-reliance on people and not enough of a reliance on systems. And as such, when you start bringing more clients in or more people in, things don't work as well as they used to before. So by having some robust systems, processes, and workflows in place to begin with, it can really, really help with this stuff. So it's fairly obvious, really, from running through those things, that having systemized processes and workflows can help with all of that. It can help you with delegation. It can help with a hybrid remote working model. It can help you to be more efficient and to scale up. It can help to reduce errors and mistakes in terms of the work that's being done. So with that in mind, let's look at how we actually systemize these things. When we're saying systemized processes and workflows, what exactly do we mean? What are we referring to, and what is it that we're actually trying to achieve? So within an accounting firm, there are obviously many processes, just like any other business out there. You know, you've got at the very top there workflows, and workflows are how the work gets done. So this could be a year-end workflow. You know, what are the exact steps that needs to happen for every client in order to create and file their year-end accounts. Equally, there might be a workflow for payroll. What are the steps that need to happen every single month in order to run payroll for our clients, etc., etc. You know, bookkeeping, VAT, confirmation statements, incorporations, etc. You know, all of these things apply. They are examples of workflows within the business. And as well as this, there are other processes. There's your sales process. You know, what is the step-by-step process that happens from a new prospect inquiry to getting them signed up as a client? What are the marketing processes? How do you actually generate those new inquiries in the first place? And then we have a few other things as well: team management, HR, and new client onboarding as well. So clearly there is a lot that we can go after there, but for the sake of today's session, the one thing that I want to focus on very specifically is this top one: workflows. How we actually get the work done within the accounting firm. So I mentioned at the beginning that this session, I really wanted to kind of strip everything back and go very much back to basics, because this does not need to be a complicated topic. It is very simple when we look at it, but it's just a case of figuring out what the steps are and what we need to do at each step. So the anatomy of a workflow. What are the key elements of a workflow? You know, what are the key things that happen within a workflow where we do work for clients? So the first thing is activities. These are the things that, you know, the tasks that you do. We log into Xero and we reconcile these transactions, or we file this with HMRC, etc., etc. These are all the activities that make up the workflows. The second part of this kind of formula is people. You know, who is involved in this workflow? Who needs to be involved in this workflow? Does it need to have a default assignee? For example, if it's a bookkeeping workflow, do you have a bookkeeping manager that will by default is responsible for all of these things? Equally, the same thing could apply to payroll. What is the duration of the workflow? How long does it need to run for? Something like year-end accounts, the workflow might be a lot longer. It could be 7 or 8 months. Whereas something like payroll, because it's happening once a month, it might just be literally a couple of days. You know, it starts on the last Wednesday of the month and runs until the Friday, and then the payroll is ran. Really simple. And then the fourth and final thing is the deadline. You know, what is the deadline to actually get this stuff completed? Is it an internal deadline or is it an external deadline? And by external deadline, I mean things like, is it coming directly from company's house? You know, is it HMRC saying we need this filing on this date of this month? And you can see here a visual representation of all of these things in action in a workflow. So it's an example of a confirmation statement workflow where you have the person responsible at the top, the default assignee, when the task is due to start, how often it recurs, how long it's due by, and then you have the steps that are involved in completing it here, which we've described as the activities. So that is the very basics of the anatomy of the workflow. And I'm sure this is nothing that is new to you at all. You know, you probably already have this within your firm already, whether it's living in an Excel spreadsheet, on a whiteboard in your office, or maybe you're using existing practice management tools to manage all these different steps in your workflows. So if those are the steps of the workflow, what can we do to make them more streamlined, to make sure that there is enough information in them that fewer mistakes take place? What can we do to make sure that our remote or hybrid teams know exactly what they need to be doing? What can we do to make them more efficient and more scalable? And the answer is here. It's standard operating procedures, SOPs. The name sounds really long and boring. But what exactly is a standard operating procedure? So this is really step-by-step instructions that detail how we complete specific tasks. And a little bit later in the presentation, I'm going to be sharing some tools or some ways that you can make these instructions a lot more detailed than what they might already be. And the result of that is that, you know, fewer mistakes do happen. People know exactly what they're doing. The training is much better for new team members, etc. They help to achieve efficiency. They help to achieve quality of work and also consistency. You know, it's not just a case of, oh, we had a good week and we managed to get everything done on time and to a good standard here. It means that everything is happening consistently throughout the year. And it also helps to reduce miscommunication as well. Now, I'm going to make an argument here, and I'm going to suggest that, yes, you could document your standard operating procedures on Google Docs. Yes, you could do them on Word documents. You could host them on an internal intranet. You could use tools like Notion or Confluence to build these libraries of process documents for your workflows in your accounting firm. But I believe that the single best place for these SOPs to live, specifically for your workflows, is within a practice management system. And there are two main reasons why I believe this is the case. The first reason is that it's live. It is not just words on a page. It's not just a document that has been created, time has been invested into it, and then it's been left there to gather online dust. It is something that is live. And because it's live, it means that it can get tweaked and updated all the time. It's not just a case of creating this once and then leaving it, because the fact is, the reality is that these systems and the processes change all the time. You know, the apps that you're using in the workflows, for example, maybe using Receipt Bank for invoice and receipt capture, the way that you use that as part of your workflow might change if the app changes. And because of that, you need to be able to update the standard operating procedures and the workflows alongside it. And the way to do that is by having it live inside your practice management system. And the second reason, kind of similar to the fact that it's live, is the fact that it actually gets used. There is nothing more frustrating than spending time and energy creating systems and processes and documents and manuals and guides on how to do these things, and then they don't get used. It's something that's emailed to the new person when they join, and you say, please sit and read pages 1 to 50 of how we do accounts and bookkeeping in this firm. It just doesn't get used like that. Whereas if it's in your practice management or workflow system, you know for a fact that it's getting used every single day, every single week, every single month of every single year. So going forwards, the things I'm going to share with you are really based around how we can build more streamlined and more detailed process templates for our workflows within a practice management system. Cool. Hopefully I'm not going too fast. I'm just going to grab a quick drink of water because I'm not used to talking this much, believe it or not. So I mentioned on the agenda that there is a certain C word that is an incredibly powerful tool, and you'll be relieved to know that the C word is not coronavirus, it is checklists. Checklists are incredibly powerful things to use inside processes and workflows, and I'll explain why. You're probably wondering what you can see on the screen here, and what it is some checklists way back when, from 1944, for Boeing B-17 bomber planes. And the reason I'm sharing these with you is because there is a story behind them. And the story is that Boeing created this really fantastic bomber plane that was going to be used in the war. And it was probably one of the best planes going in terms of the missile capacity and the things that it would be able to do. The only trouble is that it was quite complicated to use and fly. So when Boeing went to the US Army base, UK Army base, can't remember which, and they did a demonstration to show them how it was used, the plane took off and then very quickly came back down again and burst into flames. Thankfully, the pilot was okay. But the result of this was that Boeing didn't win the big contract with the Army, and they went with somebody else. But because the Army was so impressed with the potential capability of the plane, they ended up buying 2 or 3 of them just for their pilots to experiment, to play around with. And over time, these pilots realized that in order to figure out the best way to use these planes was to go back to basics. It was to actually create a step-by-step checklist outlining each of the individual tasks that they needed to do from the moment they actually got into the plane to the moment they took off and then landed again. And you can see those broken down on the screen here. And after doing this, the planes were then used in the war, and they flew hundreds of thousands of miles without a single incident. You know, the only incident that they had was the initial one when they were doing the initial test run. So this story really kind of proves the power of a simple but effective checklist. And today, checklists are used in all kinds of professions and industries. Brain surgeons follow step-by-step checklists. You know, these are people that have studied for years and years and years to get to where they are and to do the things that they're doing, but they still follow methodical checklists in order to help them with their work. So very quickly, what are the benefits of a checklist? It's kind of obvious, but let's just run through them in any case. The first is that it can turn tasks, what could be quite chunky things that we're doing, activities, into very bite-sized steps. The second is that it ensures that no step is missed, and that also they're all completed in the correct order. And I think this one is quite important because, you know, I've personally experienced it where I'm completing something that I've done hundreds, if not thousands of times before. But because I'm so flat out busy and I'm working on this whilst thinking about the next two things that I'm going to be doing, suddenly I've missed out a step, I get further along and I'm like, oh no, I need to go back 3 steps now because I missed something out in the first place. And as a result, you end up spending more time and more energy kind of going and undoing what you've done in order to do that initial step. So by having a checklist in place, you make sure that no steps are missed and that everything is completed in the right order. And this is great, especially for new team members that are maybe unsure, people taking on new responsibilities where they're not as familiar with the process, therefore they haven't quite memorized and made that muscle memory of all the tasks that need to happen. And it's also great for the remote and hybrid working model where you don't need to worry about whether they're going to do steps 1 to 10. It's there on a checklist for them to run through. As a result, helps to free up mental RAM. That's for yourself. You know, you don't have to worry as much. You're not concerned that people are going to be missing things out. But also for the person completing the task, I'm not sitting down and thinking, oh, what's the next step after this? What do I need to do? It's there in front of me in black and white. Just tick this one off, move on to this one. So you can see here an example that I've pulled in from Pixie of how a checklist might be effective. So on the left-hand side, we have 4 very simple steps for a bookkeeping workflow. And as you can see, the second step, process bookkeeping, is quite a big chunky step. For the bookkeeper in the accounting firm that does this day in, day out and has done for the last 5 years, you know, this is easy work for them. They know exactly what they're doing, and the chances are that they're going to do it right every time without missing anything out. But as I mentioned earlier, you know, people can make mistakes. Mistakes happen when you're busy, when you're working flat out, or if the bookkeeper was off ill or on holiday and somebody else in the team was having to cover for them. There might be a gap in knowledge or a gap in application. And as such, having a checklist that you can see on the right-hand side here underneath the description of all the items that need to happen really helps to break down what that task is and the exact deliverables that need to happen for it. And I'm sure that these checklist items might not be 100% accurate. This is something I've just pulled together for the purpose of this this presentation. So if you're kind of scratching your head thinking that's not quite what we would do for bookkeeping, I apologize. I'm a marketer, not an accountant or a bookkeeper. So hopefully now, hopefully you understand and appreciate where checklists can fit in terms of workflows and also the benefits of using them within workflows as well. So checklists are, I guess, one part of the equation. They are the process part of the equation in terms of how we document our workflows. But there is also a bigger part that we need to think about, which is the actual training. You know, how do people know, if we go back a screen, assuming somebody was picking up this task for the first time or covering it and they've only been doing it a few times, how are they clear exactly what reconcile all bank accounts and confirm statement balances is or looks like, or how it works? And the answer is training. Now, training could be leaving some written step-by-step instructions on the task or the checklist, or it could be using something like video. Now, why would we use video? Why would we invest time in recording videos for this stuff? Well, here are a few reasons. The first is that you can turn simple instructions into visual demonstrations. instead of me saying, go to receipt bank, go to this part, allocate it to this zero code, hit publish, etc. For somebody that's done that 1,000 times before, that might be, they can do it with their eyes closed. But for somebody that's not as familiar or is new or is picking up the task for somebody else, they might not understand what that means. So having a visual demonstration helps to enhance the training and also the delegation of that particular task. Touching on what I just mentioned, it helps people to follow along better if they're doing it for the first time, if they're unfamiliar with exactly how the task works and what it is. And it's really, really good for hybrid teams, especially when you're working at different times. Let's say you've got a few part-timers that maybe some work in the morning, some work in the afternoon, and as such, people's diaries don't always match up. This is great because it's not a case of, okay, I now have to wait until tomorrow to reach Laura to find out how to do this. There is a video there that explains exactly how I can do it in her absence. So just following on from the earlier example that I shared on the bookkeeping workflow, you can see here now how enhanced it is with a video. And in this case, I've opted to just include one video. And that one video would include all of these checklist items, walking through how to do them step by step. Depending on what exactly the checklist items are and what's involved, you could go into more detail. You can go as granular as you want in this training. You can create a video for each individual checklist item explaining exactly how it works and what it does. And the beauty of this is that once you've recorded those videos once, assuming that the system you're using or the process itself doesn't change, that is something that can be used time and time and time again. It doesn't matter if you bring in one new team member or 4 new team members. Within your practice management system, within your workflows, everything is set up properly for them to see. So as they're working through doing their tasks, they tick things off. If they're unsure, they watch the video. And then if they really need extra clarification, they can reach out to yourself or one of the team to find out more how to do that. Cool. So moving into the kind of final point that I wanted to touch on in terms of the anatomy of workflows. Internal deadlines and milestones, what exactly are they? Well, not all jobs have just one deadline. So let's say, for example, a year-end accounts workflow, there might be several milestones throughout it that you need to meet. And these milestones might be things like, we need to have the documents in by this date, or we need to have the draft accounts ready by this date, and we need to have them filed by this date and the corporation tax paid by this date. So there's, within this workflow that has a kind of end deadline, there are several milestones and internal deadlines that need to be met. And you can use these to create a buffer. And what that buffer does is it allows you to control a space of time between when work actually needs to get done and when you would like it to get done. So instead of working up to the deadline every single month on every single task, by using internal deadlines, so let's say, instead of saying that, I'm making this up as I go, payroll needs to be done by the last Friday of the month. If you wanted to create a bit of breathing space, a bit of a buffer, you could say that we want it finished by every Wednesday, by the last Wednesday of the month. And what that does is it buys you that extra 2 days worth of time. And what this ultimately allows you to do, and this has been kind of from conversations I've had with people using Pixie, is that it really allows them to run the practice on their own terms. Instead of feeling like they're constantly working up to the next deadline and rushing to get things done and file them on the exact day, it creates that level of breathing space. It gives them that bit of flexibility that allows them to run the practice and run their workflows the way that they want to. So I mentioned there the example of a yearly accounts and tax return workflow, and it's quite a long one to fit on this screen. So I'm just going to jump into Pixie itself to show you what that would look like. Now this doesn't, you might use a different practice management app, you might not use one at all. This doesn't have to be done in Pixie. I'm just sharing this as an example for you. So if I come down to here, so you can see here that within the workflow, there are a few internal deadlines and milestones. The first is 1 month after the task starts, which is saying, once the task has started, within 30 days, we want to make sure we've got all of the information from the client. Great. What that means is that we're not rushing around 2 months before it's due to actually get all this stuff done. Then we can have another deadline 5 months after the task has been created. We want to have the accounts prepared. Perfect. Again, it creates that level of breathing space. A bit further on, we have another one 6 months after it started, saying we want to have the accounts finalized and ready. 7 months after, we want to have them submitted. Then the payment gets made. Then the workflow gets closed. So hopefully you can see here within this workflow how the internal deadlines and milestones help to manage the different stages of the workflow. And to give you another example, I was speaking with Simon Chaplin. Simon, as you may know, he runs Greenstones Accountants. He also does his Socks Up Simon mastermind groups. And he was saying that in his firm, they use internal deadlines to almost create false deadlines for when work needs to get done. And the reason they do that is to trick the brain into thinking that they need to get the work done sooner than they actually need to. And the result of which is that they're not working up to the deadline on things. They're not rushing to get things out on that day, because that is the day it's actually due. They've got everything ready a week in advance. So, and if you're interested in learning more about that, perhaps reach out to Simon. He can elaborate and explain in a bit more detail than what I've just done there. So, flying through this at breakneck speed this afternoon, which is good. It means we don't have to keep you for the full hour. Just a quick recap in terms of the things that we've covered so far. These are the reasons why investing time in streamlining our processes and workflows is really, really important. If you find yourself struggling to delegate and let go tasks, if you find that work is landing back on your desk with mistakes and errors from team members because of gaps in the process of workflow, if you find that with team members off ill or on holiday, or because of the new remote and hybrid working model, things aren't getting done as slick as they used to, or maybe there are gaps in knowledge and people aren't able to communicate as effectively as they once were able to, that's another reason why. And then the fourth and final thing is really to do with efficiency and scalability. Having these systemized workflows, processes, and templates in place really enhances the efficiency of your operation and also makes it a lot more scalable. We looked at standard operating procedures and what they are, how they work, and I made the case for what I believe is the best place for these standard operating procedures to live is inside your practice management system. And the reason why that is the case is because they are live, they get used, they get updated all the time. So you've seen a bit of, I've shared a kind of few snippets from Pixie in terms of what the workflows and the templates look like in there. And the beauty of having the checklists and the videos in there is that if things change or you need to add another step in, you just add it on the template, and then the next time you're doing year-end accounts for a client or payroll, it's automatically updated. The training is there, the steps are there, all the information is there for you or your team members that you need to complete the tasks properly. We looked at checklists and the power of them. We looked at videos and how they can be used. One thing I forgot to mention in terms of videos actually is how you actually record them. I'm sure many of you have heard of a tool called Loom. If you haven't, I would recommend Googling it, Loom. Loom is a screen recording tool and it's really easy to use. I'm not sure if you can see my top corner here. There is a little red icon with a blue 9. If I click on that, it will allow me to record my screen and camera, my screen only or my camera only. And as such, I can record videos. So I can share what I'm doing on my screen, record videos talking people how to do things, and then just embed that directly on the workflow task. Just close this out of the way. And then the final thing we looked at was internal deadlines and milestones. How do we use internal deadline management and milestones within the workflows to help manage the different stages and also create a buffer between when work needs to get done and when we actually get it done ourselves. So before I just jump into the final thing, in terms of a game plan, I guess, in terms of action points that you can take away to actually do some of this stuff yourself, the best place to start, if you don't already have some kind of process procedures in place, is sit down with your team. I know it's hard right now. Everybody's incredibly busy with everything that's going on, and it's even harder managing the move back to the office and figuring out what the new working setup looks like. But actually, it's never been a better time to spend some time with your team, looking at the processes and documenting them. So figure out what are all the workflows within the business, what are all the services we deliver, and then once you have the workflows, break them down. What are the activities within the workflow? Who are the people that are responsible for them? What are the deadlines? What is the duration? And then once you've got that overview in place, you can start to add a bit more color. So within each of the activities, how do we break this down into individual checklist items? You know, what are the 3 steps that need to happen? Tick them off one by one in order for this step to take place. What are the videos we can record to enhance the training so that people know exactly where to click and what to do when they're doing it? And once you've done that, hopefully you should have quite a robust set of standard operating procedures for your workflows that exist. The next logical question really is where do they exist? And I've made the point, I think twice already, that I think the best place for them to exist is in your practice management system. Now, you might already be using a practice management system, and that's fine. And if you are, I would recommend investigating how you can optimize your workflows within there to include things like checklists and videos, so that when people are working through, they have that clarity, they don't miss steps, they have all the training that they need to complete things properly. If you're not currently using the practice management system, or you're interested in learning more about how Pixie might be able to help support you with this kind of thing, then the fact is that it can. You know, you've seen on some of the screenshots I've shared with you today that within Pixie, within the workflows, you have the ability to add the checklist items and also add the training videos. And I'll just very quickly show you how easy that is. So if I come out of this template here and come to the bookkeeping one as an example, the first step of the workflow template is really what we were talking about in terms of the anatomy of the workflow. You know, what is the name? What is the description? Who is the person responsible for it? Is it a particular client manager, or is it a payroll manager or a bookkeeping manager? When do we want the task to start? How often do we want it to recur? And when is the deadline? Obviously, if there was an external deadline here, you'd be able to sync it directly with Companies House so that all of those deadlines match up. And once we've got that, we're really into the activities. What are the things that need to happen within this workflow to get the work done? And those activities could be any number of things. It could be instructions. And within instructions, we could add checklist items. So, can't spell this afternoon. Or if we wanted to add a bit more color and a bit more training to enhance it, we could embed a video. So I've mentioned Loom as an option, but Loom doesn't have to be the only option. You could embed a YouTube video if you host them there. They could be on Vimeo. They could be anywhere. As long as the video is hosted online and has a URL, you can embed it directly on the task in Pixie. As well as instructions, there are a few other things. Automated emails is a big one. For example, at the very start of this workflow at the top, you can see there is an automated email that goes out to the client to say, just let me close this one off. Automated email that goes out saying, we're starting your bookkeeping for the last month. Please, can you upload any new information? There's then a link to the portal within Pixie so the client can upload documents directly. They get saved to the record, and then we can move forwards to the next step, which is to process the bookkeeping. They have the checklist items explaining exactly how to do that, and a training video to enhance it as well. So you can see how Pixie can help to support the creation of these workflows and templates for you and your team to follow. I've just seen something in the chat box, Andrew sharing that it's useful to map processes visually in Lucidchart or Miro before building the task. Yeah, absolutely, Andrew. I probably didn't go into as much detail as I could have in terms of the actual game plan, but would 100% recommend, you know, before you ever put I guess pen to paper in terms of adding this to Pixie or another practice management tool or Google Docs or Confluence or an internal intranet, map it out visually. Make sure you've got all of the steps in place before you actually spend time adding them to a system. So if you are interested in Pixie at all, these are the things that it includes. I'm not going to spend too much time on this today because I wanted to make this webinar more about workflows than the actual Pixie demo. We do have a demo of Pixie this Friday at 11 a.m. if you're interested. I can post the link in the chat box a little bit later. But as well as workflows and job templates, Pixie also includes email management. So you have a priority email inbox and emails get saved directly to client records. There is a CRM so that you have all your client details and all of the information that you need about the client. There is file management, which I kind of showed you there on the automated email, where clients can upload documents directly to Pixie into our portal. They get saved onto the client's record for you to use. There is some really, really robust and simple task management. So you can manage your to-do list on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. We have heaps of automation inside to help, trigger these workflows and templates at the right dates. Team management is incredibly easy, especially now you've got a remote hybrid working team. I'll just show you very quickly. If you wanted to be able to see what your team are working on, how tasks are being completed, you simply click on the work report, and straight away you have a full visual of all of the tasks that are currently in process, who they're assigned to, and when they're due by. Obviously, you can see here at Pixie HQ, we're not on top of our workflows and everything is overdue, which is not so good. For the data enthusiasts, I know there's a few of you out there that love to see graphics and data and tables. You can export this in a CSV format or an Excel format, and then you can import it into something like Power BI or a similar tool in order to get some nice visuals on the work that's in progress. And then the final thing is that we have integrations with Companies House, Gmail, Office 365, and also we can connect to both Practice Ignition and more recently Go Proposal, which is awesome, via Zapier. If you are at all interested, please go ahead and start a 30-day free trial. You get full access. The pricing is there. We have a flat price, unlimited clients, unlimited users, £49 a month. That's as much as you will ever pay. And there's a quote here from Kieran Phelan, who is one of our Pixie users, who believes it's, he's having great results for it. So I'm just going to launch a quick poll. So if there is anyone here that is interested in learning more about Pixie, let me know and I can get some information across to you. Gives me a chance to have a drink of water as well before I lose my voice. Great, thank you very much. Cool, thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of the session. Thank you very much for joining us. Hopefully some of what I've shared has made sense. If you are interested in learning more about Pixie, we have a demo this Friday at 11 AM. Just go to usepixie.com/demo. You'll be able to register there and you'll get a full demo of not only how the workflow part works, but also how everything else works. In the meantime, if you have any questions, please reach us on Twitter. The Twitter handle's there in the bottom right corner @usepixie. But in the meantime, enjoy the rest of your day. Enjoy the long bank holiday weekend that's coming up. Hopefully the weather's nice. It's not looking so great right now though. And yeah, hopefully see you all soon. Thank you very much.